Beautiful soul, have you ever wanted to speak to angels? Do you believe angels can support you in your daily life? If this is you, go to my website homepage, theangelmedium.com, and sign up for my weekly angel message email. As a gift for signing up, I'm giving you access to free resources, including 31 healing meditations that, if you do daily, are going to help you hear your angels and your own intuition more clearly. Start using these today, and you'll see changes in 31 days. Now, take a deep breath. Feel the presence of your angels as they fill you with love, joy, peace, bliss, and ease. And remember, your angels say the messages that resonate with you in today's episode are meant just for you. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Angels and Awakening podcast. I'm your host and author, Julie Jancius. Friends, today we're here with Dr. Will Cole. He is the author of the new book, Gut Feelings. He has multiple other New York Times bestseller books, but this book, Gut Feelings, Dr. Cole, is so incredible because you are bringing us back to love, compassion, for our own bodies. And I'm really excited to get to spend this time with you today.
Thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk about something that's really important to me.
Yeah. So, you talk about shameflammation, two words that you put together, shame and inflammation. Talk to us a little bit about this and kind of where this idea started for you.
So it's born out of my day job. I run a telehealth center. We started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers 13 plus years ago at this point. So 10 hours a day, that's what I'm doing. And it's when you're dealing with people that have metabolic issues, hormonal problems, autoimmune problems, digestive problems, to anxiety, depression, fatigue, you cannot ignore, it would be hard to ignore the mind-body connection. So shameflammation is just my made-up word to explain the research around the mind-body connection and the research specifically around shame and the things that cause shame, like unresolved trauma and chronic stress, and shame around food and shame around our body and how that impacts our biochemistry. So if I'm trying to facilitate a protocol in a patient's life to lower inflammation or calm down a dysregulated nervous system or to balance hormones or improve their digestion, we can work on the physiological side when we talk about, implementing a food protocol or a natural like supplementation protocol or biohacks or the running labs and looking at the data. We will invariably get stuck at plateaus if people have not dealt with the mental, emotional, even spiritual component to it. So it's a major part of our clinic and major part of protocols we integrate is not just the physiological, but the psychological, the mental, emotional, spiritual, and really informing people and educating people the fact that they're one and the same. Mental health is physical health. You really can't separate the two. And we get stuck with unsustainable results or stuck at plateaus when we have an either or approach. It should be both and when you're talking about someone's health.
Yeah. So what role does shame play on the body?
So shame, Brene Brown says it very directly, and I quote her in the book, is that shame is lethal. Shame is connected to many different health issues because it's something that's going to contribute to the dysregulation of something called the neuroimmunoendocrine axis, which is the intersection between the nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system. And by immune system, I'm mainly talking about chronic inflammation, which is a product of the immune system, and the endocrine system, hormones. So the neuroimmunoendocrine axis, the connection, the intersection between those three systems of the body are going to be fundamentally disrupted and dysregulated by shame and all the surrounding emotions and issues around shame, not just shame itself, but the heaviness that it brings. So one of the things that we look at with initial telehealth patients are something called someone's ACE score, or ACE. It's their adverse childhood event or experiences. So we're talking about things in an initial telehealth consult with really heavy things like childhood trauma, or was there physical abuse, emotional abuse growing up, verbal abuse growing up, was there neglect growing up. The higher the ACE score, research shows you're more likely to have an autoimmune issue or a metabolic issue or trouble, hormonal problems, or obviously anxiety and depression. So it doesn't mean it's the only component. It's one side of that gut and feelings, the physiological and psychological bidirectional relationship. But we need to look at it for many people. It's a component to why they feel the way that they do. And it's actually informing their choices with foods and so many things. So it's what it's doing is it's influencing our biochemistry. It's something that happened in the past maybe, but it's living as if it's happening here and now. And our body, it's said another way, our body is a cellular library, and our thoughts, our words, whether it's to ourselves or to others, our experiences, our emotions are the books that fill up that library. So it is literally stored in the body, and it's impacting inflammation levels or hormones in our nervous system.
Yeah. And I think one example of that you give in the book is intergenerational trauma, which you said can also be passed down through the gut. And you kind of give some hope. You say, like, if this can be passed down, this can be healed. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the research around intergenerational trauma or transgenerational trauma is one of my favorite parts in gut feelings, because it is so powerful. The research is so powerful. The choices we make in our life is not just for us. It's for generations. It's for our directly people around us. Not even if you have no kids, even just your friends and family, you are influencing your community. And you're obviously, if you choose to have kids, you're influencing their health, not just in a nurture level, but also on a nature level, actual genetic level. And as I say in the book, as trauma can be inherited, so can healing. You can break the chains of ancestral dysfunction, disease, dysregulation for yourself, but for generations you'll never get to see. And that's the legacy that I see my patients get to leave for their line and for their families. It's powerful to see. So research shows that the studies are done mainly on more extreme geopolitical things that have happened in human history, like the Holodomor, which is the Ukrainian man-made genocide in the early 20th century. Joseph Stalin basically starved and killed millions of Ukrainian people when they wanted to have independence. I mean, history is repeating itself right now. And the researchers, and I'll start with that, Holodomor, the Ukrainian genocide, the Holocausts in Poland and Germany, and Rwanda, the Hutu and the Tutsi genocide in the 90s. All researchers showed that obviously the people that went through this horrific atrocities had changes in something called methylation, the way that their body expressed inflammation levels, neurotransmitters, hormone synthesis. It's a big interconnected myriad of pathways known as methylation. And they saw these distinct changes in the person that went through the traumatic event, but also their children and their grandchildren, like generations on this same distinct changes because of the trauma that their ancestors went through. So like, to the person that's hearing this, sometimes when I'm talking to telehealth patients about this, they think, oh man, I'm screwed. Like, I know my family, like as if like it wasn't bad enough to have to deal with my own crap. Now I have to deal with my great grandma's crap. Like what the heck? How can I ever overcome this? But I'm saying this to tell you, you don't necessarily have to know what's my trauma and what's great grandma's trauma. But what, if anything, I hope this gives you, the listener out there, some grace and lightness to know sometimes the odds are stacked against us, but some people have heavier experiences than others, but I see people overcoming the heaviest of things, and you can overcome these things. And just know that it's not, sometimes people feel like I'm broken, or I'm just a weak person, or what's wrong with me. it's not necessarily always just you. It's things that you've come into the world that you are living out the experiences of our ancestors, that but we all have the chance to overcome and heal.
Yeah.
And that's really the message of the book.
Mm-hmm. So I get this on a very, very deep level because I can see the threads of intergenerational trauma and how that has played out with our physical bodies between my grandmother, my mother, and myself. And sometimes it feels like being on the hamster wheel of like, okay, I'm always just trying to figure it out and it's not working and I'm trying to figure it out. And your book was just such a breath of fresh air because it's like, stop stressing about it, and I've got a lot of these self-limiting beliefs where I'm so good in other areas of my life, but when it comes to my physical body, I'll think to myself, well, my grandma couldn't get it under control, my mom couldn't get it under control, so I'm not going to, and I'm going to inherit this diabetes, or like I've tried so many times and I failed. And so I feel on a very profound level what you're talking about when it comes to this shame. Because it's such I think about everything in terms of energy. And this for me is like a beast, this huge monster. And nothing else in my life is really that big of a force. But it's very, very challenging.
Mhm.
And so I'm just wondering, where do you start? And like, are you going to be on this hamster wheel for forever? What are like the three places that listeners can start, or I could start, um, to really heal for good?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with me. I know. And that's just you sharing that. I mean, I'm sure you talk about in the podcast all the time, but I'll just, as someone who talks to people 10 hours a day, knowing, like hearing other people's story, that alone metabolizes stored trauma. Like you knowing you're not alone and
Mhm.
there's someone out there going through similar things, because you're not alone. I mean, you what you're going through is very, very common, sadly, but we can overcome it. And many people are left to fend for themselves, and there's a lot of shame around these stories. And they feel like, this imposter syndrome, like I am doing well in so many other areas. Why am I keep failing in this area? That's human. We all have those. So I think just infusing a grace and lightness, I think, into these shame-based stories that we tell ourselves, to know that, we all are going through different things. And especially with our, social media culture, where we have these, like, we see everybody's filtered highlight reels, and it's not like the nitty-gritty dirty stuff that really all of us have. So look, we're talking about three things. Number one, well, let's just say this. Somebody's into healing, or like, let's just say the next level of their healing. Because normally I'm not meeting somebody at square one. Like they've already done some self-work or worked with other doctors or therapists, or, but they're kind of stuck in a plateau. They're on that hamster wheel to some degree, and they're looking how to just really overcome this so they can move on with their life and not get kept back from these things that are keeping them back, whether physical or mental, emotional, and spiritual. So one of the reasons why I called the book Gut Feelings is to look at both sides of that, gut and feelings. Like, how do we deal with the physical and the mental, emotional, spiritual, but also that concept of gut feelings or gut instincts, or I feel it in my gut, or butterflies in my stomach. Somehow our ancestors knew that the majority of our intuition, somehow, the seat of the soul somehow was in the gut or around the gut or was connected to the gut. So, the gut and brain are actually formed from the same fetal tissue. So when babies are growing in their mother's womb, they are grown from that same tissue, and they're linked inextricably for the rest of our life through what's known as the gut-brain axis, or the connection between the gut and the brain. Researchers refer to the gut as a second brain. If you think about it, the intestines kind of even resemble the brain when we're talking about the large intestines, the small intestines, and the stomach. And about 75% of the immune system's in the gut. Inflammation is a product of the immune system. 95% of serotonin, our happy neurotransmitter, is made in the gut. 50% of dopamine, our pleasure neurotransmitter, is made in the gut. They work upon the neurotransmitters that are made and stored in the gut, work upon what's called the vagus nerve, which is the largest cranial nerve in the body, which is responsible in part for our resting, digesting, hormone balanced, grounded aspect of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic. So many people that are dealing with these hamster wheel situations, which for some people, it could be metabolic issues, type 2 diabetes or weight loss resistance or insatiable cravings, like some blood sugar problems. For other people, it could be autoimmune issues. For other people, it could be digestive problems. For other people, it could be anxiety or depression or fatigue. These are all hamster wheel problems for people. That is just the human story right now. Because when you look at the statistics, it's the vast majority of people are dealing with these chronic health problems that are somewhere on this inflammation spectrum. They all have inflammation as a commonality, even the brain health stuff that I talk about in the book. There's something called cytokine model of cognitive function. It's researchers looking, and these are conventional medical journals, looking at how does inflammation impact how my brain works? How does inflammation impact mental health? So the gut plays a major role in all of these things.
Wow. Thank you so much to the 250 people who raised their hand to volunteer and start a local chapter of Spiritual Women in their part of the world. If you'd like to join one of these free local chapters and hang out with spiritual women in your area, go over to my website, theangelmedium.com, and enter your email address at the top of the homepage. Soon, we'll be sending you an email with a list of local chapters you can join for free. And friends, I'd love your help getting the word out about this. If you're a podcaster who'd be willing to have me on your show to talk about this community project, or an influencer who'd be willing to go live with me on social media, maybe you own your own business and your clients would love this. We can send you info that you can email to them. Or if you have another idea of how we could get the word out, we'd love your help connecting as many women around the world as possible through local chapters of Spiritual Women that we're forming right now. In the show notes, there's a link to a form you can fill out to help us get the word out. You can also use this form to become a local chapter leader. Oh, friends, I feel the magic. I hope you feel the magic too. The angels are putting together this incredible worldwide network of soul sisters, and I am just so excited to see how they work through us to help bring us together in friendship and serve the world.
So if you're looking for, okay, what's the, if we say three things, or what's the biggest needle moving things? Like if I do nothing else, like what's the most bang for my buck? If I put this seems overwhelming, like what's going to help me the most? And I would say starting with supporting gut health is very influential. There's a lot of paths to that, but at least that being an intention and a goal and finding tools to do that is hugely profound, because you're going to start to untangle a lot of things from its roots. So things that are kept, like, for example, insatiable cravings or blood sugar dysregulation, if we can get the gut healthier, that's going to create more metabolic resilience and metabolic flexibility. So you are in a more proactive and less of a reactive state when it comes to foods we crave, or our mood, or energy levels, or digestion. So I talk about something in the book called a GAPS protocol, which is an acronym that stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome, or Gut and Physiology Syndrome, which focuses in part on lots of soups and stews. So very easy, economical, accessible ways to use food as a medicine, but also use food as a meditation, and really as mindful eating, nourishing your body with these nutrient-dense, yummy, delicious foods that love you back. And there's the feeling side. There's so many ends there, but I talk a lot about them in the book. But breath work is one that's huge for a lot of my patients, is really using basic breath work, like box breathing, to more advanced protocols we implement into telehealth patient protocols, like holotropic breath work, which is similar to psychedelics, actually. And it's really an amazing feelings tool on gut feelings to metabolize stored trauma. So those are two. I mean, but there's so many. There's a whole protocol in the book that I lean people into. But breath work, supporting gut health are two profound ways to grow physically, but also meaning grow in wellness physically, but also mental, emotional, spiritual wellness too.
That's so profound. I read that in your book when you said, don't just, use food. Where did I have it here? As something you said, as fuel, use it as meditation. And I was like, who is this guy? This guy is amazing. Um, how do we take the journey of food and the journey of health and make it a spiritual practice or a spiritual journey?
So I think first of all, educating yourself. I think the person that's asking that, I would say empowering yourself with information, because so many people are disconnected from between what you eat and how you feel. Like they
Mhm.
just do something because that's what they've always done, or that's the way their family ate, or it's the convenient thing, and they're not really stopping and mindfully checking, does this food love me back? And that's really the conversation that I'm having in the book. I mean, because you read it, but it's not about a list. It's not about a moral failure, right? It's not about a list of good foods and bad foods. It's, does this food love me back, or does this food not love me back? And it's really a conversation around healthy boundaries. It's a conversation about wanting and self-respect and wanting to feel good. And that's what this is about. Is not a moral punitive judgment on like I'm a bad person if I have this food that doesn't love me back. No, it's not. It's I want you to use meals as a medicine and meditation, because every food we eat either feeds inflammation or fights it, meaning it's going to make you feel good or may not make you feel so good. And there's a lot of bio individuality with this.
Mhm.
Is that what works for one person may not be the best for, and I can think of the healthiest real foods, whole foods that may work really well for me, but I can think of a patient where that doesn't work so well. Like every example you can think of, where
Mhm.
it's like I try not to make too many broad sweeping overgeneralized statements when it comes to food, because there's a lot of science and art to these topics, because some people can really have a lot of inner resistance and obsession about foods, in a way where it's like even if the food theoretically would work for somebody, that stress and anxiety would produce a completely different result around it. So we have to look at not as, and this is how I say it in the book, you can't just look at what you're feeding your body, but what are we feeding our head and our heart? Like what's the head space and heart space in which you eat the meal? So I would educate yourself basically on the foods that are most likely not to love most humans back, what I call the inflammatory core four. That's going to be looking at added sugar, looking at refined grains, looking at overconsumption of something called industrial seed oils like canola oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil. And there's nuanced conversations to this, because them by themselves, those oils by themselves aren't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but it's the overconsumption of them.
Yeah.
And then conventional dairy, again, there's better versions to everything I've just said, but for sake of simplicity, looking at those core four that are most likely to disrupt that second brain, to mess up your gut, which is such a major regulator of our mood, our inflammation levels, and our hormones. But also, if I could add a plus one,
Yeah.
it would be alcohol. It's
Yeah.
looking at our relationship with alcohol, which I talk about in the book, and the impact that that has on disrupting that gut feeling connection. So I
Mhm.
don't know if that answered your question, but I would say look at the foods, and then looking at educating yourself on the foods that are most likely not to love me back, and then from there eat mindfully. And I'm not making any huge drastic changes on like you can't eat these throughout the book, so I'm just growing. I want the reader to grow in awareness on how these foods make me feel, so they can make that decision for themselves
Right.
on if it loves them back or not.
Okay, so I feel everything with energy too, and like when you go eat certain foods that were alive, berries, salad with a lot of vegetables in it, it feels like there's a buzz or a hum in your body and so I want you to kind of break down for people, because I think that there's a ton of people out there who don't know what it means for foods to make you feel good versus feeling bad, because perhaps a lot of people, I know this was me for a very, very long time. I was like, what do you mean foods make you feel good? Like, I just feel like crap all the time. So how can foods make you feel better? What does that look like?
Well, every meal is another, and every snack is an opportunity, another opportunity to move the needle one way or the other. And that may seem like a lot, and some are negligible. Some are not, you're not going to notice it right there, right then, but it's going to be a cumulative thing. And some in big, significant ways. So I think being realizing that our mood or energy levels or our digestion or our sleep or our metabolism, all of those things are literally built by the foods we eat and what we're feeding our head and our heart and our thoughts, words, and emotions. The things we're taking in, whether on a meal level or what I call in the book, these metaphysical meals, right? Our thoughts, words, emotions, experiences, those are metaphysical meals that are also influencing your biochemistry just as much as that actual meal. So it's the raw materials, the food. If you're talking about food specifically, it's providing the raw materials your body needs to make neurotransmitters, to make hormones, to make your digestion work, to make the literal cells of your body. So the saying "you are what you eat" is very much steeped in science. That we would not, our body is alive because of brilliant biochemistry, and the foods we eat influence that biochemistry. So it is that profound. It is that that's the agency we wield with every meal. And I think it's finding the foods and learning and being curious enough to learn about the foods that love you back. Mm-hmm. And again, avoiding foods that don't love you back isn't restrictive. Right. It's not toxic diet culture. It is self-respect. And I think having that paradigm shift of saying, whoa, I want to feel great more than I thought I wanted something that's going to dim my light. I want to feel great more than I want something that's going to make me feel like crap. And that's the paradigm shift of what I call in the book food peace. It's having this sort of inner deep discernment and knowingness of what your center is and creating that center actually for yourself. Because when you calm inflammation levels and you have better regulation between the gut and the brain, you have a more regulated neuroimmunoendocrine axis that I mentioned. That sympathetic fight or flight stress state is calmed down. That parasympathetic, the vagal tone is increased. You're more regulated and grounded. You've created a physiological, but also a mental, emotional, spiritual center for yourself. So at that point, there's not much that's going to shake you because you kind of know what works for you and what doesn't. And you're still human. You're not perfect, but you have a resilience to you and a light to you that people's noise on social media or whatever, life stressors don't shake you like it used to.
And it was so funny. While reading your book, I kept getting this very, very profound image of that your food and meals and just even drinking water throughout the day is a complete opportunity for you to deepen your spiritual practice by just being present, maybe even praying over it before we eat, having that meditative, peace-filled state. You also talk about achieving joy through nutrition. This is amazing. You have to share this with everybody.
Yeah, it is. It's a stress-free food plan in the book for people to really find joy in foods. Like when maybe it's the cooking of the meals or enjoying the meals. When you're eating foods that love you back, it is a joyous occasion. It is fun. It is creative, and it could be a hobby. It could be a hobby in many ways to eat foods that love you back. Because it is a relationship where you're healing your relationship with your body. You're healing your relationship with food, and you're also healing your actual body too. So it's actually a positive experience all around. It doesn't mean it's easy always. It doesn't mean it's linear. Healing is certainly non-linear for most of my patients, but it's one that they have their eye on the why. Like their why is bigger than their excuses. Their why is bigger than the uncertainty or fear of doing something new. So yeah, it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner can be a party for sure. Even with yourself, of just learning what foods make you feel good. And when you have energy and you're sleeping well and you really are comfortable in your body, it is a joyful time. It is a good time overall. So it's and across all boards, they talk about the FOMO culture in the book, right? This fear of missing out, which many people are eating distracted, scrolling this sort of endless FOMO-inducing content on social media, where I talk about this antithesis of FOMO culture, JOMO, this joy of missing out, and cultivating JOMO with food or with stillness and other forms of self-care, of getting out in nature, of basically disconnecting to connect, which there's so many art forms and paths to do that.
One of the things that's hard, I know it's a trigger for me and a lot of moms that I talk with just locally in my neighborhood, is, we all have small kids, right? And that they've got foods around, and it's hard to only have healthy foods in the house to do all of that prep work. Is there an easier way? Is there a magic pill, Dr. Cole, where we can have easy foods that we just go get and don't have to do as much preparation for? Or do you really feel like we just have to make this a bigger hobby in our life, that we're spending more time on the preparation of food?
Great question. I have two kids myself. I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. She just turned 14 last week. So yeah, I'm used to that dynamic, right? And they're homeschooled too, so they're home more than most kids. Which in some ways I get it, probably could be easier, but yeah, they're still at their friend's house. They still have a lot of co-op, like dance and acting and theater and sports and music. They're with other kids. They're not isolated. I get it. I hear you. And I see patients for a living, and I have kids in traditional school, and I see the considerations, the being creative with this life that we live, right? These different lives that we live, and modernity. So I would say, first of all, we as parents, I think that we should not add shameflamation to this topic, right? We're all on a different path. We all have different access to different things. We all have different schedules, and we all have different kids with different needs. So I think, first of all, just going back to that grace and lightness to this whole topic. Mm-hmm. And we all could have done better. Like, even this is what I do for a living. And I can tell you that I could say, oh my gosh, man, if I would have done this, and this 10 years ago, it would have been so much easier. So if the guy who does this for a living, who writes books about it and consults people about this stuff, could do it differently, just be easy on yourself, because it's just a human thing. We're busy living, that cliche of the days are long, but the years are short. That is true on a deep level. Because I'm like, how the heck is my baby boy 16 freaking years old driving a car? It's unreal. So it's like we're just doing the best we can, and the days are busy, and it's like, wow, the days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and into years, and time passes by so quickly. So with that said, I think that we need to set the culture in our home and do the best we can, because I hear people, new patients will tell me, like, well, my kids will, like, they'll freak out, or like they won't eat that stuff. But the reality is, unless they're driving and picking things up themselves, or I guess they could get Uber Eats on their phone if you give them access to this stuff, but that's a whole different topic of healthy boundaries with that. But I would say we need to set the culture in the home. And yes, if this is a new change, you may be worried about a coup d'etat, where they're going to overthrow parents and take over if you bring berries in the house or whatever, some fruits and vegetables. But I think getting them on board, letting them buy in to a certain degree, but they may not buy in to entirety, but you're the parent. And I think setting the tone in the home, and, we as parents know our kids will do lots of things that we know aren't good for them. And I think that us just putting a line in the sand and saying, no, we're going to shift the culture in our home. Obviously, the earlier, the better, but it's never too late. Like, start whenever you're hearing this conversation. And that's what I would start with. And then most of our patients decide, especially as the kids get older, they're not going to micromanage the friend's house or like the school event. Yeah. They're just setting the culture for home, because what that will do is plant seeds for the kids to grow in awareness and mindfulness to how foods make them feel. So when they are at the friend's house, they will want less of that stuff, but they can still live that life. They can still live their life, but they will love feeling great more than they thought they wanted something. I see this in my son all the time, where he has a lot more of body awareness when it comes to how foods make him feel. So he will have things that I wouldn't have at the house over at his friend's house, but he will either choose not to have it because he doesn't like how it makes him feel. And there was experimentation to know that. Or he will say, I'll have less of it. I won't have as much because I know how it makes me feel. But we want our kids to start growing in agency and awareness of knowing how things make them feel and make decisions for themselves. So I think that's would be my suggestion. But as far as the practical stuff, like with like, okay, time in the kitchen, or like we live in such a time where there is a lot of convenience foods that are better for you or healthy options. So they typically cost more, but if the convenience is more important for somebody, which it is for me sometimes, I would say really lean into brands that are doing innovative things, that are boxed, they are packaged, but the ingredients are cleaner, they're better, they will love your kids better. So Thrive Market's a great one. Even like going to, I mean, look, I live in Western Pennsylvania. It's by no means like the mecca of wellness, but I could go to Aldi and Costco and Walmart and Target and get organic, like freezer meals and things that are better for you options. They're not the healthiest things under the sun, but they are way better. So look at those core 4 ingredients, like looking at refined carbohydrates and gluten, looking at added sugar, looking at industrial seed oils, looking at conventional dairy. If kids had less of that, you'd have a lot better healthy kids, a lot better behavior too, as far as behavioral problems that are fed by these foods. So those are some suggestions, but I do like the way you said it, where it's like, all right, maybe we need to spend more time as a culture in the kitchen and spend more of our resources on foods. So I do feel like we have lost, like people would have done more of that throughout human history. And now we want the convenience over the time, but use it as a bonding experience. Get kids involved with their food. Like if you have access to a garden, get them involved with that. If you're in an urban setting, go to an urban garden, go to a farmer's market. If you don't want to garden, like get them in the cooking process. I do feel like you can make it fun and make it an activity as a family.
Yeah. In the book, you talk a lot about self-compassion and the link between self-compassion and inflammation within the body. And I'm wondering, as you've worked, because you work with so many people, you're Gwyneth Paltrow's functional medicine practitioner. Um, there are a lot of people out there who have these triggers. As a woman who grew up with the magazines in the 90s, it's easy to kind of go back and forth on your journey to become healthy of, all right, you're getting triggered because you see something and you want your body to look a certain way, but then you're like, nope, I'm going to step back from that and take on that self-compassion. Can you talk to that a little bit? And how do you keep going deeper and deeper into self-compassion and not reverting back to those triggers?
It's going to be nonlinear. We're talking about neural pathways that are deep for some people. So it's a practice like anything else. It's really like going to the gym once and saying, well, the gym didn't work for me, right? It's like, oh my gosh, like what's wrong with this gym thing? It's showing up and flexing that mindfulness muscle, which is going to take time to tone and get strengthened and build new neural pathways. Our body is plastic. Neuroplasticity is really the research of how the brain can be melded and molded over time. And we can actually strengthen these weak parts of our nervous system, the vagus nerve being part of it, which is that more grounded, hormone balanced, resting, digesting aspect. So it's not the sexy answer, but it's the real answer. Is just consistency. It's showing up when you don't feel like it. It's being consistent when you don't feel like it. Because I see patients put in the time and it pays off. And then it becomes less of a thing. It becomes less of an arduous task whenever you it becomes a rhythm, and there's more of a second nature to it. There's an effortlessness to it. Doesn't mean it's always easy, but it becomes easier the more consistent you are, because it's not this sort of, oh wow, I'm really weak in this area. This comes very unnaturally to me. Does not come naturally to me. The more you flex that mindfulness muscle, what I mean by that is self-compassion practices, which, as you mentioned in the book, the research shows lowers inflammation levels. The people that had the highest self-compassion scores had the lowest inflammation levels. So things like breath work, somatic practices, EMDR for people who need that. I talk about forest bathing, getting out in nature. These practices that most are free or low cost, accessible tools to strengthen the vagus nerve from the feeling side of gut feelings. It's just being consistent. Find a few tools within your toolbox that resonate with you, that you can stay consistent with, and stay consistent with it. But I mean, many of my patients, you're talking about people that are dealing with more complex autoimmune issues, metabolic, hormonal problems, anxiety, depression. Some of them put in an hour a day on this self-work, which seems like overwhelming to some people, but not everybody has to do an hour a day. That's A. And B, even if you do have to do an hour a day, the things most of us do, and the amount of time we spend on our phone, or the time that we're watching Netflix, it's like this is an hour of a day to change not only your health, but your family's health as well.
Yeah. And that hour a day that they're spending, it's practices that are leading them to more self-compassion, like
Yeah.
kind of that mental emotional piece.
Yes, it's different tools to strengthen the vagus nerve. So breath work, somatic practices, meditation, these type of things.
Wonderful. How do people know when they're healed?
I don't, that's a good question. It's a wonderful question. How do people know if they're healed? Well, look, I can give you the fluffy answer and then I give you the sublime answer. So I think that I want people to live the life that they want to live, right? I want them to have the energy to do the things that they want to do. I want them to feel grounded and rooted in their body. And there's just a deep knowingness, the Bible calls it the peace that passes all understanding. That's like what this looks like from people that have achieved it. But we're all humans, and there's never a time, well, if you've met this person that's achieved this, let me know. What if they become this sort of demigod, demigoddess, where they're just like levitating and they've hit some sort of nirvana here on earth? Maybe that'll happen someday when there's a critical mass of something. But I think for now, it's a flux. It's an ebb and flow. There are things to work on, but it's not that they've arrived,
Yeah.
but they've created that center that they can pivot from and live their life. And that doesn't mean they don't have bad days or down days or things to work on or things that come up
Yeah.
in their health. They do. But there's this sort of, because they've created this center, they know how to get back there, and they have the tools within their toolbox to get back there. So it's this constant dynamic flux is really what it is. It's not the static thing of I've achieved this thing and now I don't have anything to work on with my health anymore. It doesn't happen. So I think, and then if you want to get a little bit more granular on like data stuff, look at labs. Like we look at optimal, not average in functional medicine. So, okay, if you want to look at data, we can look at data and say if your blood sugar is here and you don't want it to be here, let's get it there. And we could look at comprehensive data to say this is where vibrant wellness resides. But even if I get the person all in the vibrant wellness zone, which we do, they're still humans and they still can vacillate, and that's okay. So that's kind of my thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I've been asking a lot of different types of healers that question over the last year. And I think it's really fascinating because I think it actually speaks more to people's perspectives at the beginning. That there's so many people out there who are like, okay, well, I just want to go through the process of, energy healing or,
Mhm.
becoming a medium or working with functional medicine and just be healed. But that's not like, there is no ending. The ending isn't the goal, it's the journey that's
Yeah.
the goal.
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly it. Because I see people in their 90s and like they've been working on this for decades, and they feel great. They're just doing it to optimize. They're just living this. They're wanting to stay on top of this human experience until the day they're not here anymore.
Yeah. Amazing. Dr. Cole, your book, I think, is ahead of its time. Gut Feelings. I think this is so needed by people on earth. And I think that the words of wisdom that you have in there are just going to be so healing to so many individuals. So thank you for putting this book out into the world. Where can people find you and your work?
Thank you so much. Everything's at drwillcole.com. That's DRWILLCOLE.com, if I know how to spell my name. Yeah, but we have new telehealth patient options now open. It links to my podcast, The Art of Being Well, is there, and lots of free resources. I have thousands and thousands of resources for people I've written over the years for people who just want to start leading their health in the positive direction.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Beautiful soul, thank you so much for joining me today. My name's Julie. You know I'm all about connecting you with messages from your angels and loved ones on the other side. If you've been listening today and you're super excited and just have to know which angels are around you right now, who's connecting with you, and what messages they have for you, go to theangelmedium.com. Register for a session. You can do a reading with me or a member of my team, and we can help you in making sure that your angels are doing the very best they can to support you and guide you to your best life. If this sounds like you, virtual sessions, they're only offered on my website. Sign up today. And if you're the person who's really excited, you can sign up for my Angel Reiki School to become a certified angel messenger. That's for the healers among us who feel called to grow their intuition to the max and serve humanity with their gifts. You'll learn Reiki, mediumship, how to deliver angel messages, and how to get clients. That's the Angel Reiki School at theangelmedium.com, or DM me on Instagram at Angel Podcast with any questions. Before you go, connect with your angels by placing your hands on your heart. Take a deep breath. Imagine a doorway filled with God's unconditional love is right in front of you. Step into that love and feel it as it fills your body, chakras, and auric field. Now ask your angels, what would you have me know today? And open yourself to the positive, loving messages they have just for you.